Eliza Quinn here. Picture this. A flawless Chicago wedding with Anya in her dream gown, only for her to flip the script on her cheating groom and sister by blasting their murder plot on a Jumbotron during Vows. What happened next will leave you speechless. Thanks for having me on, Eliza. I'm here to share how I turned blind trust into fierce self-protection, exposing the lies that nearly cost me everything. My name is Anya Kowalski, and I should have known something was wrong when my fiancé started caring about life insurance. At 28, I'd built a successful graphic design business from the ground up, the kind of American dream my Polish immigrant parents had sacrificed everything for. My ash blonde hair was always pulled back in that sleek, low ponytail that had become my signature look, professional, controlled, the image of a woman who had her life together. My green eyes, inherited from my grandmother in Krakow, had always been good at reading people. Except, apparently, when it came to the two people I trusted most in the world. The wedding was set for October 15th at the Crystal Gardens Conservatory, a stunning glass venue overlooking downtown Chicago. 300 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and enough white orchids to fill a greenhouse. Every detail had been meticulously planned over 18 months. The invitations were custom letterpress on handmade paper, each one costing more than most people's dinner. The cake was a 7-tier masterpiece that cost $15,000, more than most people's cars. The $50,000 Jumbotron screen at the center of the venue was supposed to display our love story montage during the ceremony. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a statement. A declaration that Anya Kowalski had made it in America, just like in the movies I'd watched as a little Polish girl dreaming of princess gowns and fairy tale endings. Liam Richardson had swept into my life 3 years earlier at a gallery opening. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, spontaneous, the kind of man who could make you forget your own name with his smile. Where I was methodical and careful, he was adventurous and free-spirited. He balanced me, I thought. Made me laugh when I took myself too seriously. His family had old money, the kind that came with trust funds and summer houses in the Hamptons. My parents, who still spoke Polish at the dinner table and counted every penny, were initially skeptical. But Liam won them over with his easy charm and promises to take care of their daughter. My sister Kasia was my maid of honor, naturally. 2 years younger than me, she'd always been the wild one, the one who dated musicians and changed her major 4 times in college. But she'd seemed to settle down lately, working as a yoga instructor and talking about finding her purpose. When I asked her to stand beside me on the most important day of my life, she cried and said it would be the greatest honor. We spent hours planning the bachelorette party, choosing her dress, discussing the speech she'd give at the reception. She was my best friend, my confidant, my sister. I remembered when we were kids how she'd stood up to the bullies who made fun of my accent, how she'd held my hand during thunderstorms, how she'd promised we'd always be sisters no matter what. I should have trusted my instincts when things started feeling off. It started with small things. Liam began working late more often, claiming his investment firm was expanding into new markets. He'd come home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine, explaining it away as a new client or a networking event. When I'd suggest we grab dinner together, he'd suddenly remember an important call he had to take, disappearing into his home office for hours. The life insurance conversation happened on a Tuesday in August. I was reviewing our wedding budget for the 100th time when Liam brought up protecting our future. He'd been researching policies, he said, and thought we should both increase our coverage significantly. $2 million each seemed reasonable, given our combined assets and future earning potential. "It's just about being responsible, Anya," he said, kissing my forehead in that patronizing way that I'd started to notice more often. "Making sure we're protected if something happens." My Polish pragmatism agreed with the concept. My parents had always emphasized financial security, the importance of planning for the worst. But when Liam insisted on being the sole beneficiary of my policy, something cold settled in my stomach. I hesitated, my methodical nature screaming warnings that I tried to silence. For a moment, I almost suggested we wait, almost voiced my concerns. But then he looked at me with those blue eyes that had once made me melt, and I pushed down my doubts. When I suggested we should be mutual beneficiaries, he got defensive. "Don't you trust me?" he asked, those blue eyes that had once made me melt now feeling calculating. "We're getting married, Anya. We're going to be family. This is what married couples do. Against my better judgment, I signed the papers. What I didn't tell him was that I secretly contacted my insurance agent the next day and added a clause requiring police investigation for any claims over $1 million. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, "Trust, but verify, Kachini." Around the same time, I started noticing the looks between Liam and Kaja. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. They'd always gotten along well, maybe too well, I was starting to realize. But there were moments during wedding planning when I'd catch them sharing glances that lasted a beat too long. Private jokes that excluded me. Times when I'd walk into a room and they'd stop talking, turning to me with matching guilty smiles. They had this little inside joke about coffee dates that made them both laugh in a way that felt secretive, intimate. I'd ask what was so funny, and they'd brush it off as nothing important. The worst was during the final dress fitting. Kaja had come with me to the boutique, and while I was in the dressing room struggling with the intricate beadwork, I heard her phone buzz. Through the thin curtain, I heard her whisper urgently, "Not now, someone might hear us." The way she said us made my blood run cold. When I emerged, she was staring out the window, her face flushed. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Oh, just work stuff," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You look absolutely stunning, Anya." "Liam is going to lose his mind when he sees you." The way she said his name made my skin crawl. It was too familiar, too intimate. The tone you use when talking about someone you know better than you should. The key appeared on Liam's nightstand on a Thursday morning in September. It wasn't our house key or his office key, I knew all of those. This was different, attached to a simple black keychain with no identifying marks. When I asked about it over breakfast, Liam's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. "Oh, that's just for a storage unit," he said quickly. "I rented some space for wedding gifts that won't fit in the apartment. You know how cramped we are here." It was a reasonable explanation. Our downtown loft was beautiful but small, and the wedding gifts had been arriving for weeks. But something about his tone, the way he wouldn't quite look at me, set off every alarm bell I'd been trying to ignore. That afternoon, I told him I was visiting my parents in Evanston. Instead, I followed the address I'd found on the rental agreement tucked in his briefcase. The storage facility turned out to be Meridian Towers, a sleek apartment complex in Lincoln Park. Expensive, anonymous. The kind of place someone might keep a secret. My hands shook as I slipped the key into the lock of Unit 3. The door opened with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. The apartment was small but well-appointed. Modern furniture, expensive linens, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. Her perfume hung in the air like evidence, the same expensive scent I'd been smelling on Liam's clothes for months. There were photos on the nightstand, not of Liam and me, but of Liam and Kaja. At the beach, at restaurants I'd never been to, kissing under a streetlight while I was probably at home, planning our wedding. One photo showed them at the coffee shop where Kaja and I had our sister dates, the same table where she'd helped me address wedding invitations just last week. I sat on the bed where my sister and my fiancé had been betraying me and cried until I had no tears left. Then I got angry. Then I got smart. My cousin Thomas worked in cybersecurity for a major tech firm. We'd grown up together, two Polish-American kids trying to make it in a world that sometimes felt like it wasn't built for us. I called him from that apartment, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "Tommy, I need a favor, and I need you to not ask questions." 2 days later, he met me at a coffee shop with a package no bigger than my palm. Inside was a camera the size of a screw head, so small it could hide in plain sight. He showed me how to connect it to a private server, how to access the feed from my phone, how to record and save everything. "Anya," he said quietly, "whatever's going on, be careful, and if you need backup, call me." I went back to the apartment the next day while Liam was at work and Kaja was teaching her morning yoga class. The camera fit perfectly inside the smoke detector, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. That night, I activated the feed and waited. What I saw over the next week destroyed any remaining illusion I had about the people I loved. It wasn't just the sex, though watching my sister and my fiancé together in that bed was like swallowing broken glass. It was the casual intimacy, the way they moved around each other like they'd been together for years. The way he touched her face the same way he touched mine. The way she laughed at his jokes, the same laugh she'd shared with me since we were children. But it was what I heard that turned my blood to ice. On a Wednesday evening, exactly 10 days before the wedding, I watched them collapse onto the couch after what was clearly round 2 of their afternoon delight. Liam opened a bottle of wine while Kasia stretched like a cat in the afternoon sunlight. She finalized the insurance paperwork today, Liam said casually, as if discussing the weather. 2 million, just like we planned. Kasia sat up, suddenly alert. And you're sure it will look like an accident? The brakes on her car. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I gripped my phone so hard I thought it might crack. It's foolproof, Liam replied, settling beside her on the couch. A tragic accident on her way home from the bachelorette party. Mountain roads, terrible weather forecast. Brake lines can fail, especially on older cars. We'll be devastated, of course. The grieving widower and the heartbroken sister. $2 million, Kasia mused, running her finger along the rim of her wine glass. Split 2 ways, that's a comfortable life. We could travel, buy a house somewhere warm. Maybe get married ourselves in a year or 2 after an appropriate mourning period. The perfect crime, Liam agreed. And the best part is everyone will feel sorry for us. Poor Liam, losing his beautiful bride so young. Poor Kasia, losing her beloved sister. No one will ever suspect. They clicked their glasses together like they were celebrating a promotion, not planning my murder. Then Kasia said something that made my heart shatter completely. Remember when we were kids and she used to protect me from everything? How ironic that now I'm the one who has to protect myself from her. Permanently. She laughed, and it was the same laugh from our childhood, from 1,000 shared secrets and sister moments. Now it was the sound of my own sister celebrating my planned death. I sat in my car outside that building for 2 hours, watching the recording over and over, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. But there was no misinterpreting what I'd heard. The 2 people I loved most in the world, the 2 people I'd trusted with my life, were literally planning to take that life for money. The grief lasted exactly 1 hour. Then it crystallized into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous: determination. I spent the next week playing the part of the blissful bride while plotting the destruction of my would-be killers. Every smile, every laugh, every excited conversation about our honeymoon was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I confirmed details with vendors, finalized the seating chart, and had my final dress fitting while my sister stood beside me, offering encouragement and sisterly love. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," she said, adjusting my veil. "Liam is so lucky to have you." I wanted to vomit. Instead, I smiled and thanked her for being such a wonderful maid of honor. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating their downfall with the precision I usually reserved for my most complex design projects. The Crystal Gardens Conservatory had a massive Jumbotron screen as its centerpiece, originally installed for corporate events and galas. It was supposed to display a slideshow of our relationship highlights during the ceremony, our first photo together, vacation pictures, candid moments that told the story of our love. Tommy helped me hack into the system. He was initially reluctant, but when I showed him the recording of their murder plot, his face went white. "Jesus, Anya, we need to call the police." "We will," I assured him. "But first, I want them to know that I know. I want them to understand exactly how thoroughly they've been exposed, and I want it to happen in front of everyone who matters to them." It took us 3 days to rig the system properly. The Jumbotron would display the romantic slideshow as planned, right up until the moment I gave Tommy the signal. Then it would switch to a live feed from the apartment camera, followed immediately by the recording of their murder plot. The audio would be crystal clear, amplified through the conservatory's professional sound system that could reach every corner of the venue. I also made an anonymous call to the Chicago Police Department, providing them with the address of the apartment and telling them to be prepared for evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder that would be revealed publicly at approximately 4:30 p.m. on October 15th. I gave them my name as a potential victim and told them exactly where to be. I secretly updated my life insurance policy again, removing Liam as beneficiary and adding a note about the threats on my life. The hardest part was the acting. Kasia threw me a bachelorette party at an upscale spa, complete with champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. She gave a speech about how proud she was to be my sister, how excited she was to watch me marry the love of my life. She looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me while planning my murder. During the party, she made that same joke about coffee dates that she'd been sharing with Liam, and I finally understood it was code for their secret meetings. Liam was equally convincing. He brought me flowers for no reason, told me how much he was looking forward to our future together, made love to me with what felt like genuine passion. If I hadn't seen the recording, I might have convinced myself I was imagining things. 3 days before the wedding, he surprised me with a weekend getaway to a cabin in Wisconsin. "Just us," he said, kissing my neck. "A little pre-wedding retreat before all the chaos." I almost laughed. He was trying to get me alone, probably to sabotage my car and make it look like an accident during the drive home. Instead, I told him I was too stressed about final wedding preparations to leave town. The disappointment that flashed across his face confirmed my suspicions. "Of course, baby," he said smoothly. "The wedding comes first. If only he knew how right he was." October 15th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that makes you believe in fairy tales. I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, surrounded by the familiar comfort of family photos and the smell of my mother's pierogi drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, I almost forgot what I knew. Almost let myself pretend this was just another bride's pre-wedding nerves. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Kaja. "Today's the day, sis. Ready to marry your Prince Charming?" The rage came flooding back, cold and clean and purposeful. My mother helped me into my dress, a stunning creation of French lace and Austrian crystals that had cost more than my parents' first car. My hair was swept into that signature sleek low ponytail, with my grandmother's pearl earrings catching the morning light. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had everything she'd ever wanted. It was almost funny, in a sick way. "You look like a princess," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "Your Babsha would be so proud. She always said American girls could have fairy tale weddings." I thought about my grandmother, who'd survived the Nazis and the communists, who taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the cost is high. She would have understood what I was about to do. The bridal party gathered at the conservatory at noon for photos. Kaja looked stunning in her cornflower blue dress, her dark hair in an elegant updo that complemented my blonde ponytail. She hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear about how perfect everything looked. "This is going to be the most beautiful wedding ever," she said. "I'm so happy for you, Anya, so happy." I hugged her back, memorizing the feel of her arms around me. After today, I'd never touch my sister again. The guests began arriving at 3 o'clock. Liam's family took up the left side of the conservatory, old money elegants in designer suits and understated jewelry. My family filled the right side, a mix of Polish-American relatives and the friends I'd made building my business. Among the 300 guests were my 50 Polish relatives, many wearing traditional embroidered vests and the amber jewelry passed down through generations. The cost of this wedding, $200,000, represented everything my immigrant parents had worked for. 300 people who'd come to celebrate what they thought was the beginning of my happily ever after. At 3:45, I got the text from Tommy. "System is live. Camera feed is strong. You sure about this?" I typed back. Never been more sure of anything. At 4:00, the music began. The processional was everything I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl watching American wedding movies in our cramped apartment. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as my bridesmaids walked down the aisle in perfect formation. Kaja went last, her smile radiant as she took her place at the altar. She caught my eye and winked, and for a split second, I saw the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd braided my hair and taught me to ride a bike. Then Liam appeared at the altar in his custom tuxedo, and reality crashed back down. He looked magnificent, tall, confident, every inch the successful businessman who'd swept me off my feet. His smile was perfect, practiced. The smile of a man who thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. The wedding march began, and I started my walk down the aisle on my father's arm. 300 faces turned toward me, all smiling, all celebrating what they thought was a love story. Liam's mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, overcome with emotion at seeing her son marry the woman of his dreams. His father stood proudly, chest puffed out with satisfaction. They had no idea they were about to watch their son's life implode. I reached the altar and my father kissed my cheek, whispering, "Be happy, Kachani." My heart broke a little, knowing how much this day meant to him, how proud he was to see his daughter achieve the American dream. Liam took my hands, and for a moment, looking into those blue eyes that had once made me believe in forever, I almost wavered. Almost wondered if I'd misunderstood what I'd seen and heard. But then he squeezed my hands, and I remembered the casual way he'd discussed cutting my brake lines. The officiant began the ceremony with remarks about love and commitment, about the sacred bond we were forming. The irony was so thick I could taste it. We moved through the traditional elements, The readings, the blessing of the rings, the exchange of vows. Everything proceeded exactly as rehearsed. Finally, we reached the moment I'd been waiting for. "Liam," the officiant said, "please recite your vows to Anya." Liam cleared his throat and began the speech he'd memorized. Beautiful words about eternal love and unwavering devotion, about how I'd changed his life and made him a better man. He spoke about our future together, the children we'd have, the life we'd build. Every word was a lie, delivered with Oscar-worthy sincerity. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Even I almost believed him. "Anya," the officiant continued, "your vows to Liam." I stepped closer to my groom, close enough that only he could hear me. The microphone wouldn't pick up what I was about to say. This moment was just for us. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "I love you," he whispered. I looked him directly in the eyes, my green gaze steady and cold. "Prove it," I whispered back. Confusion flickered across his perfect features. Behind him, I could see Tommy at the tech booth, waiting for my signal. I gave an almost imperceptible nod. The $50,000 Jumbotron behind the altar, which had been displaying a romantic slideshow of our relationship, suddenly flickered. The images of our happy moments together vanished, replaced by a live feed from apartment 3B. The timing was perfect. Liam and Kaja were there right now, thinking I was safely occupied with hair and makeup touch-ups. They were celebrating their imminent victory, their plan finally coming to fruition. The camera captured them in crystal-clear detail as they kissed passionately, their hands roaming over each other's bodies with the familiarity of longtime lovers. A collective gasp rippled through the conservatory like a wave. Guests began pulling out their phones, recording the chaos unfolding before them. Whispers turned to murmurs, turned to outright exclamations of shock. I watched Kaja's face beside me drain of all color as she realized what was happening. Her bouquet tumbled from nerveless fingers, scattering white roses across the marble floor. Liam's head whipped around to stare at the screen, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in the span of 3 seconds. "Anya," he started, his voice cracking. "I can explain," but I held up my hand for silence because the real show was just beginning. The feed switched to the pre-recorded clip, and suddenly the conservatory was filled with the sound of their voices, enhanced and amplified through the professional sound system that could reach every corner of the massive venue. "And you're sure it will look like an accident, the brakes on her car? It's foolproof. A tragic accident on her way home from the bachelorette party. Mountain roads, terrible weather forecast. Brake lines can fail, especially on older cars. Will be devastated, of course, the grieving widower and the heartbroken sister." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive conservatory. Then chaos erupted like a dam bursting. Guests were shouting, crying, pointing at the screen where the recording continued to play. Cell phones were everywhere, capturing every moment for social media. Liam's mother, who had been dabbing her eyes with joy just moments before, stared at the screen in horror. Her face went white as paper, then gray, then she swayed on her feet. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing commotion. "No, not my son, not my." Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed in a dead faint, taking down a massive floral arrangement worth $3,000 and 3 other guests in the front row. The conservatory erupted into complete pandemonium. Guests were shouting, crying, pointing at the screen where the recording continued to play. My parents looked stunned, unable to process what they were hearing. My elderly Polish relatives were crossing themselves and speaking rapid prayers in Polish. Liam's father was purple with rage, screaming at his son about family honor and disgrace. Several people were calling 911, though whether for Liam's mother or to report the murder plot, I couldn't tell. Cell phone cameras were flashing everywhere as guests documented the most dramatic wedding meltdown they'd ever witnessed. Through it all, I stood perfectly still at the altar, an island of calm in the storm I'd created. I felt nothing but a profound, cleansing sense of justice. This was exactly what they deserved. Liam grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You crazy bitch," he snarled, all pretense of love finally dropped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I looked at him with the same expression I might give a particularly unpleasant insect. "I've saved my own life," I said calmly, "and exposed yours for what it really is." Kaja was backing away from the altar, shaking her head frantically. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said loudly, though her voice was shaking. "This is some kind of sick joke, Anya. You've lost your mind." But the recording was still playing, and now it had reached the part where they discussed the insurance money, where they toasted to my death like it was a business deal. The part where Kaja laughed about how ironic it was that the sister who used to protect her would now need protection from her. There was no explaining that away. The first police officers entered the conservatory just as the recording ended. I'd given them the apartment address and enough information to get a search warrant, and they'd clearly found what they were looking for. Detective Rodriguez, a serious woman with kind eyes, approached me while her partner moved toward Liam and Kaja. "Ms. Kowalski, I'm Detective Rodriguez. We need to talk." I nodded, suddenly feeling very tired. "I have copies of everything," I said quietly. "The recordings, the apartment address, the insurance paperwork. It's all real." As the officers moved to arrest Liam and Kaja, I turned to address my wedding guests. Someone had mercifully turned off the Jumbotron, but the damage was done. 300 people had just witnessed the complete destruction of what they'd thought was a love story. Half of them were still recording on their phones. I took the microphone from the officiant's trembling hands. My voice, when I spoke, was steady and clear. "I want to thank you all for coming today," I said, looking out at the sea of shocked faces. "I know this isn't the wedding you expected to attend, but sometimes the truth needs witnesses, and I can't think of better ones than the people who love us." I paused, gathering my thoughts. In the front row, Liam's mother was just regaining consciousness, supported by her husband and a paramedic. She looked at me with such pain and confusion that I almost felt sorry for her. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my fiancé and my sister were having an affair. I also discovered that they were planning to murder me for my life insurance money. What you just saw and heard was evidence of that plot. The police are here because I reported it, and because I believe in justice, not revenge. The crowd was dead silent now, hanging on every word. Cell phones continued recording, and I knew this would be all over social media within hours. I want you to know that I don't regret exposing them this way. A wedding is supposed to be about truth, about standing before the people you love and making honest promises. Today we got truth, just not the kind anyone expected. I set the microphone down on the altar and began walking back up the aisle. My ash blonde ponytail swayed behind me and my green eyes were dry. I'd cried all my tears for these people weeks ago. As I passed my parents, my father reached out to touch my hand. "Anya," he said quietly in Polish. "Are you all right?" "I will be, Tata," I replied in the same language. "I will be." Outside the conservatory, I kicked off my designer heels and unzipped the back of my wedding dress. The October air was cold against my skin, but it felt like freedom. I stepped out of the gown completely, leaving it in a puddle of lace and crystals on the perfectly manicured lawn. Tommy appeared beside me with a jacket and a pair of jeans I'd asked him to bring. "You did it," he said simply. "Yeah," I replied, pulling on the clothes. I did. In the distance, I could hear sirens as more police arrived to process the scene. Liam and Kaja were probably being read their rights right about now, their perfect plan unraveling in the most public way possible. They'd spend years in prison, assuming they were convicted, and their reputations were destroyed forever. As for me, I was free. Free from a marriage that would have ended in my death. Free from the illusion that love was enough to protect you from the people who claimed to care about you. Free from the naive woman who'd believed in fairy tales. I had my business, my real friends, my parents who loved me unconditionally. I had my life, which was more than I would have had if I'd trusted the wrong people. 6 months later, I received a letter from Kaja in prison. She wanted to explain, to apologize, to somehow make me understand that it wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. I threw it away without reading past the first line. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, and some truths are too ugly for explanation. Liam never tried to contact me at all. I heard through mutual friends that he blamed me for everything, claimed I'd manipulated the evidence, insisted he was the real victim. It was exactly what I'd expected from a man who could plan his fiancée's murder with such casual cruelty. The wedding that was supposed to be the beginning of my real life turned out to be exactly that, just not in the way I'd planned. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having your worst fears confirmed. It means you can stop wondering if you're paranoid and start protecting yourself. And sometimes, justice looks exactly like a $50,000 Jumbotron screen and 300 witnesses to the truth, all with their phones recording for the world to see. I kept my maiden name, of course. Anya Kowalski, survivor. It has a nice ring to it. Eliza Quinn here. Anya, thank you for bravely recounting your story. It shows how ignoring gut instincts can lead to life-threatening betrayal, and that reclaiming power through bold truth-telling can save lives and inspire others to question blind faith in loved ones. A powerful reminder of human resilience. Veils off, justice on.